Hello, this is 6-6, which is on hemostasis, not to be confused with homeostasis, which is the maintaining of internal body conditions. Hemostasis, hemo means blood, stasis means basically to stop. So hemostasis is the stoppage of bleeding. Alright, so how does this happen? In basically 3 different phases: vascular spasms, platelet plug formation, and coagulation. This is a very difficult and complex process, so I'm going to give you the shortened, easy version. There are 13 different clotting factors that are found in the plasma of your blood that are involved with this. You do not need to know the names of all 13 and what they do, but you'll see a few of them popping up. Alright, I've cut myself, ow, and I'm bleeding. What's going to happen? Well, you get some Kleenex, you wipe it up, and then amazingly it stops and everything's great. But on the inside of you, mass chaos is ensuing. First thing that happens after you cut yourself, that immediately sets forth the first response, which is called vasoconstriction. Vaso is referring to your vessels, your arteries, your veins. Typically it's a vein because veins are closer to the surface of your skin. Arteries are usually deeper in. So usually when you cut yourself on the outside, it's going to be a vein. Unless you like severely, whoops, there goes my finger, then you got yourself maybe an artery. And arteries are much harder to constrict than veins are. So first thing, vasoconstriction. Constriction of the damaged blood vessels. Factors causing it include, so what can cause vasoconstriction would be injury to the vascular smooth muscle. Your arteries and veins have smooth muscle in there. Remember, smooth muscle, one of 3 types of muscles that don't require you to think about it. And so these muscles, when injured, they're going to release some chemicals. The chemicals usually come from the endothelial cells. Endothelial just means the cells on the inside of the blood vessel. And then also platelets. Platelets are going to send out some chemicals too to get this process going. And then also reflexes initiated by local pain receptors. So when you touch yourself, the nerves that get damaged as well are also going to tell your brain to go back and tell your vessels time to constrict. The more damage there is, the more constriction there is. So if you a deep cut, yes, it seems like it bleeds longer. It does, just because of the fact that it's a wider vessel, but it will constrict more than if a little vessel were damaged. Okay, next thing that's going to happen, step 2 in the process, is called platelet plug formation. We're going to make a plug of platelets. So the damaged tissue, you cut open your vessels, there are collagen fibers in your vessel. So here's your vessel. So when I cut it, the broken edges of collagen are going to be sticking out and just hanging out like a string on your shirt. And what happens is that these little collagen fibers allow platelets to stick. And there's this thing called a von Willebrand factor. What it is, it's a protein made by the endothelial cells. So not only do you have collagen fibers, but you have this VWF that is also sticking out, and it makes platelets kind of become extra sticky and try to weave themselves in with the fibers. Once the platelets stick to the collagen and the factor, they start to swell up. They absorb water from the surrounding plasma, and they get big, and they become gooey and sticky. And what that sticky does is if another platelet goes by, traps it, and it sticks and sticks and sticks, and then you get a big old plug. Now, we have this thing called thrombin, a chemical, which tells the platelets that it's time to release other chemicals. So once they start sticking and they start getting bigger, then they're going to release thrombin, which is going to tell your body to release some other stuff. First one is serotonin. Serotonin we usually think of as a neuroreceptor in our brain that helps to regulate moods, but it is also involved in increasing vascular constriction. So not only are we constricting due to the factors on the previous page, but now our cells are telling our body to release more serotonin, which is going to cause it to constrict even more. Then ADP, the uncharged version of ATP, that is actually going to attract more platelets. How do they figure this stuff out? I don't know. But more platelets are going to come. So, you know, they're just telling each other, everybody come to the area, help me, help me. And then we have this thing called Thromboxane A2. This is another chemical that stimulates constriction and attraction of more platelets. And then this stuff called Fibrin, which kind of holds it all together. Fibrin is usually, you can't see it in your blood, it's in the plasma, but it's only during this particular phase that it comes together and precipitates out, kind of like in chemistry. Remember when you mix two clear liquids together and you get a solid? That's kind of the same idea what happens with fibrin. So the fibrin precipitates out, and then it helps to kind of hold it all together, and now we got this nice big clot right there. This is the only other example of positive feedback. Remember we talked about childbirth is one, this is the other one. So instead of saying, oh, I have a clot, no, I want to get rid of it and go back to normal, now it's, I have a clot and I want to make it bigger. So positive feedback enhances the response as opposed to try to get it back to normal. Okay, third step that's going to happen is coagulation. Coagulation means to clot or to clump up. And what's going to happen is that the blood that is trapped in with all the platelets is going to turn from a liquid, which it flows nicely, to a gel. Helicopter. Very loud. Turns into a gel, and I'm sure you've seen, or you know, when you get a bloody nose, and then the next time you blow your nose, like you get this bloody gelatinous clot. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Now, there's three phases to coagulation. The first thing is this thing called prothrombin is going to be formed. Pro, for, yay, I'm very pro this. I'm pro thrombin, because the word thrombus, it comes up later, but it's probably good to know now. Thrombus means clot. And so prothrombin means I'm pro-clotting, yay. So there's an activator that's going to be formed, and this prothrombin is going to then be converted to a plasma protein called prothrombin. I can't talk without saying that word without spitting. Activator converts a plasma protein called prothrombin into thrombin, which is an enzyme. What do enzymes do? They catalyze reactions, they speed up things. So the thrombin catalyzes the joining of fibrinogen in the plasma to fibrin mesh, which traps the blood cells. Because remember, we've only been trapping platelets at this point, which are really, really tiny. We want big stuff. So now we're going to trap blood cells. They're bigger, and that's going to help to seal the hole. We have clotting factors, remember all 13 of them, otherwise known as procoagulants, which help out as well. So like I said, there's 13 of them. They each have a job. We don't care. Then we also have, because we don't want the clot to get too big, we want it just enough to seal the hole, but not enough to block the whole vessel. We have anticoagulants, opposite coagulants, that inhibit the clotting further, so that way it doesn't become a giant clot and then plug up the whole entire vessel. Okay. After about 30 to 60 minutes later, the clot is relatively stabilized. So it's like, okay, I've stopped the bleeding, but I'm not quite done yet. What's next? I'm going to get something called clot retraction. It's kind of like, I'm trying to think of when you like tying a knot almost. You tie a knot, but then you pull it tight to make it secure. Ooh, hummingbird. I get easily distracted in my backyard. So cute. So same thing's going to happen. All the fibrin and fibrinogen, which is holding everything together, is going to go, huh, and it's going to squeeze together. And what that's going to do is the platelets contract. That's going to pull in the fibrin strands, and it's going to squeeze serum out of the mass. I don't know if you've ever noticed, but after a cut, you notice kind of like a clear, ambery colored fluid kind of forms on the outside, and you're like, ooh, I need to pick that. Yeah, that's how you can tell the clot retraction has occurred, because all the extra plasma has been squeezed out of the mass. Yummy. And then we get fibrinolysis. Lysis, to break, to split. To split what? The fibrin. So this process removes unwanted clots when healing has occurred. So now I'm good. The smooth muscle has healed. My vessel is good to go. I don't want my clot hanging around anymore. So what am I going to do? Well, next thing. Plasmin. Plasmin is going to come in. It's an enzyme. It's a natural clot buster. And what he's going to do is he's going to help to break up the clot. And so, because you've got little teeny clots forming all over your body, you don't even know it. But we don't want those to turn into big clots, so we're going to break those up. Or if you had a clot from an injury, well then we don't want it to stay there, we want it to go away. And so plasmin's going to come in and eventually clean it up, and then everything will be good to go, good as normal. Now, unfortunately, there's always disorders with everything we learn, and so there are disorders involving hemostasis. What happens if you can't stop the bleeding? Well, there's two main categories of bleeding disorders. We have thromboembolic disorders, where we make too many clots, so we clot too good, and then we have bleeding disorders where we don't clot at all, or we don't clot very well. So we either make too many or not enough. So right now your body's pretty good at making the right amount of clots. So if we have one of these two, then it's a problem. So let's take a look. Well, a thrombus is a fancy name for a blood clot. That's a blood clot that is formed and stays in an unbroken blood vessel. So, if I cut myself, I should get a thrombus. That's good. And then it'll eventually get broken down. And then we're fine. But if my vessel is perfectly fine, there is no injury, and I form a clot anyway, we call that a thrombus. That's bad. Now, the thrombus can cause lots of problems with circulation, but it's when this thrombus gets big enough that eventually it dislodges and takes off. Now we got a big problem. That's called an embolus. So when it's stuck, it's a thrombus. When it's on the move, it's an embolus. So an embolus is a thrombus on the run. Okay? Embolism is what happens when that embolus gets stuck in a vessel too small for it. And that's what happens with strokes, heart attacks, can't think of the other one. It gets stuck in your pulmonary embolus is what they call it, cardiac embolus, cerebral embolus. So you can see that word embolus just means that the clot got stuck somewhere it should not have been. A lot of people get this when they're on really long plane rides and they're sitting. They might form a clot in their legs, and then when they get up off the plane, start moving around, the clot gets worked loose, and what does he do? He goes for a ride through your bloodstream, but then eventually in the small vessels of your lungs, boom, he gets stuck, and then that causes really, really bad problems. We do have medicines, obviously, to help reduce clotting. Aspirin, that's why there's that if you take an aspirin a day kind of thing, it's supposed to help prevent problems like that, like heart attacks. Warfarin or Coumadin, if you ask your grandparents, they probably know exactly what that medication is. The older you get, the thicker your blood gets, and so a lot of people are on blood thinners, so that way their blood doesn't clot so easily. Here's an embolus that got stuck in a blood vessel, and the reason why it's on a microscope slide is probably because it killed the guy. And yeah, that's not nice. All right, another one, thrombocytopenia. Let's break down this word. Thrombo, thrombus, cyto, cell, penia, blood, in the blood. So we have a lot of, well, if we look at the definition, not enough platelets causes bleeding from small vessels all over. So if you notice, he's got a lot of bleeding, got a lot of little bruises underneath because of the fact that there's not enough of the platelets. Another name for platelets, I don't know, platelets, thrombocyte. A cell that makes a thrombus, a blood clot. So platelets are also known as thrombocytes. So thrombocytopenia means that you don't have enough of them in your blood, and so therefore you bleed a lot, just little teeny tiny injuries. There's this thing called ITP, idiopathic, which means I don't know what's causing it, thrombocytopenia, this, purpura, which is a fancy name for bruises, which means I get a lot of bruises because my blood is thin and I don't know why. My best friend had this. You would just touch her, bruises. Found out she had lupus, which is a problem with your spleen. And so they took out the spleen, and it seemed to fix the majority of it. Another thing, if your liver isn't working quite right, because remember your liver makes a lot of procoagulants. He's the one who helps to clot your blood. So if your liver isn't working properly and you don't make these guys to help clot your blood, you end up dying. Hemophilias, which is kind of funny. Philia means to like or love. Hemo, blood. These are people who you cut yourself and you just keep on bleeding. I don't think they love blood so much. It should be hemodyslikia or something like that. So they're missing clotting factor number 8, which is why they can't clot their blood. So hemophiliacs get infusions of clotting factor number 8 to help their body clot normally. Okay, that's about it for today. So that's clotting, and we'll get into more details. I'm trying to figure out, I feel like I didn't give you the word agglutinate, agglutination, anything with that agglute part, which basically means to clot. And because I know it popped up on your homework, but I can't think of where I put it in there. It should have gone in the clotting. So I'm just letting you know what this word is in case it pops up. But anyway. All right, that's about it, guys. I will talk to you tomorrow. Bye-bye.